Fanfic Corner, presented by Jennifer. Mudslide. The Bad Batch was on another mission for Sid, like usual. This time, they were to get intel for her about some package they would have to intercept. They didn't know what it was because Sid never told them anyways, so what's new? The batch ended up on a new planet once again. They landed the ship in a clearing that they had found. Hunter was getting Omega the gear she needed for the mission and packing his backpack as well. Echo was pulling up the holo map of the area to see where they would meet the contact. Tech was analyzing the terrain so they could be prepared, and Wrecker was putting on his gear. They all gathered in the cockpit for a debriefing. We hiked to the rendezvous point in the northeast sector at the base of the mountain, where we will meet the contact and get further instructions from, Echo said, pointing to the direction they needed to go. The mountains can be very treacherous terrain, and seeing the weather outside, we'll need our rain gear, Tech said, adjusting his glasses. A little rain never hurt anyone, Ricker said with excitement. It was only sprinkling when they got to the rendezvous, where the contact was. It wasn't storming yet, but the looming black clouds made it known it was coming soon. The hike wasn't too bad, seeing how they only hiked to the base of the mountain and not the actual mountain. Hunter was talking to the informant with the rest of the batch, and Omega was looking around. The bad weather had reminded her of Camino because it was always raining and dark there. She reached out her hand from under her poncho and felt the sprinkles fall on her hand as they slid down and hit the earth beneath her. She did miss Camino, but knew that she could never go back, knowing what awaited them there if they did. The batch got done with the informant and devised a plan. Tech, Echo, Wrecker, you go up the mountain and find a way into the facility from the front and disable the alarms with the codes he gave us. Me and Omega will go through the back and sneak in once the alarms are disabled and meet you inside, Hunter finished. They set off on their separate ways up the mountain. After some time walking up the mountain, it started to thunder. Hunter could feel it shake the ground a little bit. He heard Omega pick up her pace behind him. Then lightning struck very loudly, and she hurriedly came up right beside him. "Are you okay, Omega?" Hunter questioned, noticing she was scared of the lightning. Yeah, Omega said, keeping pace with Hunter now. The lightning struck again, and he saw Omega jump and tense up. Omega, it's okay. It's just a little lightning, Hunter said, putting his hand on her shoulder and felt her relax. She looked up at Hunter and nodded. Hunter and Omega were about 3/4 of the way to the facility when it was pouring and starting to get muddy. All of a sudden, Echo came over the comms. We have the comms cut out, the facility, and meet us to... Hunter stopped and lifted his arm to speak into his comm. He felt as the water hit his arm, being uncovered from his poncho. Echo, come in. There must be an internal... There was a loud screeching from the comm, and he slid it off quickly. What was that? Omega asked. It was feedback from the other comm. There must be an interference in the frequency with the weather. Hunter turned to start walking. Hunter turned back around when he heard what almost sounded like rushing water. He looked up at the mountain above them and saw what looked like brown water rushing towards them. He realized it was a mudslide, and it would surely knock them off their feet if they didn't move. Hunter ran and grabbed Omega, picking her up off her feet. Hunter, what? But it was too late for her to finish her question. Hunter was swept up by the mud as he did not make it out in time. They were thrown off the trail and were tumbling down the mountain. Hunter protected Omega by wrapping her in his arms tightly against his chest. Finally, coming to a stop, Hunter loosened his grip on Omega. He sat up from the ground and took off his helmet. Omega, are you okay? Hunter said, worriedly. He put his hand on her face and moved her hair from her forehead, examining Omega's face. I'm okay, Omega said, looking at Hunter's face. Hunter helped Omega up off the ground. They were soaked now, having been covered from head to toe in the muddy water. Hunter looked up at where they were before the fall, noticing no way back up the mountain to their previous location. Hunter tried the comm again, but it was no use. What do we do now? Omega asked. We'll find cover before nightfall and wait till the others find us. How will they find us if the comms don't work? I'll turn on the tracking beacon, and it will alert them once they get back to the ship. Hunter had found a cave to stay in for the night. It was dark now, and it was cold. They had walked through the rain and were soaked. All the wood was too wet to start a fire, but Hunter had a lantern in his backpack, so it gave them a light source. They both took off their ponchos. Hunter was digging in his bag, and Omega was looking outside of the cave at the stars as the rain fell. Hunter was fiddling through his bag, looking for what rations he had left so that they had something to eat. Hunter wished they had a fire so they could dry off and be warm. Falling down the mountain had caused him some pain as well, and the cold didn't help with that very well. He didn't have time to worry about him now, though. He needed to focus on Omega. He saw her looking out of the cave. Come and eat, kid, Hunter said, giving her her share of the rations. They ate in silence, listening to the rain and lightning outside. After they were done eating, Hunter took off the rest of his armor so that he would dry faster. He felt even colder after he took it off. He sat back down next to Omega and noticed she was shivering. He turned and reached into his backpack, pulling out a blanket. Still not being used to have Omega around, he only thought to pack one since everyone usually had their own backpack. He wrapped the blanket around her shivering body. Thank you, Hunter, but you must be cold too. I'll be fine. Now get some rest, Hunter said, but Omega was still looking at him. I'm fine, Omega. Really. He watched as she laid down and closed her eyes. He walked over and made sure the tracking beacon was still on. He finally laid down and closed his eyes. He felt very cold, but he couldn't be selfish and let Omega freeze. He pulled his arms to his chest and wrapped them around his body, trying to warm himself up. Hunter heard the footsteps of Omega as she walked over to him. He raised his head, looking to see that she was throwing the blanket over him. She covered Hunter up and got under the blanket with him. She cuddled up next to Hunter. He could feel how cold she was. He wrapped his arms around her, drawing her as close as he could to his chest once again. He wanted his body heat to warm her up so she was no longer shivering. They both closed their eyes and fell asleep, the event of the day having drained all of their energy. The next morning, the rest of the Bad Batch found Hunter and Omega sleeping in a cave after the tracking beacon led them there. They had finished the mission and knew something was wrong when Hunter never showed up and his tracking beacon was activated. Tech bent down next to their sleeping bodies as he scanned them. Echo and Wrecker started collecting the items around the cave. Hunter was lightly snoring when he suddenly felt a gentle shake from someone. He slowly opened his eyes. Tech? Precisely, Tech said, looking down at his datapad. We have come to take you back to the ship.